But even with my athletes, the whole point is to be externally focused. The more internally focused you are, the less present you are on the information that you need to be performing. So you actually don't want to be internally focused. You want to be externally focused. So you don't want to be in your head.
True, you want to be out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. You want to be taking in all the information, all the data externally. Where's the wave? Where do I sit? Where's my competitors? All that external information taken in to then choose the right thing to do at the right time.
But do you think that obviously has to come from inside your intuition of what you know you need to do? Like you focus on the external and then channel that to the internal of, okay, what do I need to do right now? And it comes back to the I guess.
Yeah, but conscious thought takes a lot longer than muscle memory, body memory. So you want to trust that you have done the reps and that your body is competent enough to do it, that you just let it happen. I'm then going to focus externally on the tactic or the thing that I need to do and just allow my body to do it, because that will happen a lot quicker neurologically. If I'm consciously having to think of the mechanisms and stuff to do,
it's too late.
It's too late. It's too much time, and you kind of get in the way of it too. It's too clunky. Like, have you ever thought of how you specifically pop up on a surfboard? It's like that will trip you out when you go, okay, and I'm popping up now. It's like, no, you're looking down the line, focusing on the section where you want to go, and then your body's just popping up because you've done it so many times.
That's because you'd be mostly dealing with people that have kind of mastered the art of doing that. And I guess your job is then to, what would you describe your job? To critique or to almost figure out the processes to keep being able to do it at that level that they're doing it at?
Well, it obviously depends on the level, but also depends on the context. Like if we're working in a free surf situation or with the tennis player that I have later, it's in a training environment. So, yeah, there might be critiquing technical aspects of it and they're focusing on that. Then, yeah, there's going to be more internal view. Or we might be looking at a mechanism to be able to better be present or focus or whatnot. So that internal mechanism we might be looking at of how to do it. So that's going to be quite internally conscious. But then the shift in competition is it has to be external, because the number one factor of performance, the number one indicator of performance is focus. Can you focus on the right thing at the right time? And so if you're internally viewing, if you're internally focused, then you're not actually focusing on the things that are going to give you the most chance of winning and doing the right thing.
What do you think the biggest thing is that pulls athletes out of focusing when it's kind of crunch time? Do you find like something obvious or normally something that's kind of more hidden? And obviously this is different from athlete to athlete. Yeah,
well, broadly speaking, it's being too internally focused. Exactly what we're talking about. As soon as the view and the focus becomes internally about what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, what I'm doing, what I shouldn't be doing, what ifs, all those internal views is taking away from time in which you could be taking in data from your external world that's imperative to performing well. So we really don't want to be internally focused for very long. We want to be out there in the world, taking in the data, trusting ourselves to be able to do it. So, and then everyone has got their own unique way of getting a little bit hooked by internal experiences. And that's based on their biology, their genes, their learned experiences, a bunch of things. But essentially, that there's a reason why the brain is detecting a threat or giving them some noise to think about it. It's important. And so they get quite consumed by that.
Because you hear the term all the time, I was in my own head.
Yeah.
And that's normally the downfall of most results or athletes or whatever, because they get stuck in their own head.
Yeah.
And they go around in a circle.
Yeah.
In a circle and they spiral out.
Yeah.
And like they say, you miss those little things that they need to pick up on to win the medal or get the wave or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So what's some of the tools you've found is best pull someone out of their own head and puts them in the external world that they can actually get information to then use?
It's really interesting because everyone asks me about tools, and like even the coaches at surfing, they're like, give us some tools. And on one hand, I really appreciate the immediacy of having a practical, easy to use and understand tool. It's very, very helpful. But I think we also need to take a step back and I go, let's not, I guess, simplify what I'm doing to some tools-based thing. And the reason I say that is because there's a complex human that's experiencing that moment and that point in time. And to only simplify it to just give them a couple of tools in that context is not appreciating or the complexity that that human has experienced previously that is influencing how they see themselves and the world in that moment. So there's two different things that I focus on. And I was talking to an athlete about this yesterday. There's the context and there's the self. And in the context is there's pressure and there's all these different things that are happening in the context of the performance. And for that particular set of things, we can definitely look at some tools. And that's where I think a lot of people see psych and performance is like, what are the tools in the moment? And I think that's really important. And we can definitely talk to that. But there needs to be an acknowledgement that there's a self that everyone brings to an experience, to a performance, that has the potential to be optimized and looks at the context as an opportunity, that it's exciting, and they're on board to have a go at it. Or it has the opportunity to bring in all the internal pressure to then add on to the external pressure. So if you've got internal pressure from the self, which could be fear, doubts, worry, all this sort of stuff that is just your brain detecting threats because it's experienced it beforehand. If that brings that on top, plus the contextual pressure, which is you need a wave, you need a score, you know, your down match point, whatever the thing is, those two combined then makes it really, really hard to focus on the right thing at the right time. So I kind of go back and go, let's not assume that you've got a fully integrated, optimized sense of self to bring into the situation. Let's actually go back and look at that and work on that, because that has the potential to really influence the context quite a lot. And also it's acknowledging that every single person has an experience that happens within them, the underlying psyche of the individual has all these different motivations and desires, and they're an athlete 24/7, not just in that context of performance. So let's have a look at that and work on that, and then we go into the actual performance.
Could you look at it when I say like a tool as well, that can be very one-dimensional in the fact of, okay, so you got this tool and like you said, that won't work for another person. So it's like you're saying you're creating these tools that help you, but those won't help everyone because everyone has their own lived experience in a situation.
Absolutely. And there's two parts to that. It's like, firstly, just because you have a tool, does that mean you know how to use it? Like hammer.
Yeah.
I give you a hammer. But if you don't have no idea how to use a hammer, you could use the wrong end and you could potentially actually do harm, right? And you could make the situation that you're trying to fix worse because you don't know how to use a hammer. But if you know how to, if you've been taught how to use a hammer properly and to what context you use a hammer in and why you would use a hammer in that context and then how to use that hammer, then you can be a very effective hammer user, right? So that's the way I see those tools, is that what we miss so much in the tools is context. What's the context, not just breathe, right? Or just, you know, the simplified tools. Now, as I said, there is a whole lot of use in giving simple tools in immediate circumstances where you can go to, but let's provide, let's provide the context and the understanding and the why of how to use it. And then secondly, to your point, is that helpful for every single person? And I think to answer that, you have to take a step back and go, why do we assume that all worry, all anxiety, all frustration is the same? And that's, a very unsophisticated understanding of the human psyche. Sorry, got a clog in here.
There's some water there.
Thanks, mate. But because if you like going into the weeds a bit on this, mate, is I don't think people understand where worry or anxiety or frustration comes from. There's the part of the self that is trying to, there's some benevolent intent that they're trying to keep you safe, or they're trying to mitigate a thing that's happened before, right? So that's very specific to the individual. What you specifically worry about, what you specifically get anxious about, gives the breadcrumbs to why it happened in the first place. Because you weren't born anxious, or you weren't born just full of worry and fear. Something happened that the brain said, that sucked. I don't want that to happen again. Let's then put these defense mechanisms in place that protect me from that terrible feeling. So my job as a psychologist is to go in and follow those breadcrumbs to find the active ingredient behind that, or the benevolent intent from one part of the self, and see how and why that's becoming maladaptive to the other part of the self, right? And it's in that balance between one part of the self has got this desire, one part of the self has got another desire, right? That you then find where the balance is, right? And that integration, ideally, is where you have the more optimal self. But a lot of times it's just one side of it's having all the run on the other. For example, perfectionism is a great example of that. You've got one part going, be amazing, be great, be perfect. You got to be better, and that gets all the attention and gets all the voice. Now, the reason why that creates a whole lot of pressure, anxiety, worry, and overwhelm is because this other part of yourself is going, yeah, but the way you're trying to get me to be perfect and amazing just makes me feel like shit. And so there's no integration there. So that's why we got perfectionism with a whole lot of anxiety and worry, because as a protective way, it's going, yeah, but at some point, I can't deal with people just putting pressure and stress on me. So, but you've got a specific, unique way of doing that. And that's my job, to go in there and find what that specific, unique way of doing it is. And then we can start going along the track of integrating those two parts of the self. And that's why I went back and did the in-depth clinical work, is to actually understand how the psyche worked, not just looking at this contextual sports psych version of, hey, just do these couple tools in the moment. I know that was a very long-winded answer to that, but does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I get that. And then kind of when you said that last part about the whole perfection that comes with anxiety and everything, because I heard this thing the other day and it hit home with me because I can relate fully to it, but it talks about how most great athletes are broken. And I can see that from being a part of that. You're chasing this perfection and you're putting everything into it, but it carries with it so much anxiety and pressure, and part of your life kind of falls apart chasing after that thing. And you see some athletes that go until they're 45, 50 or whatever, and it's like they're trying to almost not catch something, but it's like they're not satisfied, and there's like, what's enough? And they can't get enough because they're almost filling a void in them that they can't get away from. And do you believe that that's kind of true in a way, that a lot of great athletes are kind of broken people in a sense?
I wouldn't use the word broken,
but
I know what you're saying. What I would say is it's important to acknowledge that greatness is abnormal by definition, right? To be the world's best means you're better than 7 billion other people. By definition, that's abnormal. So in order to achieve greatness, you have to achieve abnormality. And the way I see it from a psychology point of view is I'm dealing with abnormality on the greatness scale in the sports psych and the performance realm. But I don't think that gets acknowledged enough, right? If we want to stay in the middle ground and mediocrity, which is totally fine, then we can compare ourselves to the mean and everyone else. But if we're trying to be abnormally great, that comes with a whole lot of sacrifice. It comes with a whole lot of dedication, and it comes with doing things that are abnormally a lot, obsessively a lot. Like the tennis player is hitting thousands, hundreds of thousands of balls. That's abnormal. Not what most other people are doing. How much time have you spent on a bike? It's so many hours, right? How much time has the surfer spent in the water? Abnormal by definition compared to the rest.
It's an addiction.
And so part of it is addictive in the sense of what do you get, what's happening chemically if you do well and everything like that. And then you've got personality traits in there about competitiveness and this drive that people have towards it. But I think we sometimes go a little bit wrong of not acknowledging that to be better than 7 billion other people, there is a level of obsessiveness that needs to go with this desire to win and achieve. Now, on the other side of that, it's going, yes, but at what point is this sustainable? Because there's this huge drive to achieve the dream. Now, if that's internally motivated by the self, that I'm going to achieve this dream no matter what anyone else says or does, and what the outcome is, then that's one step towards sustainability. But if you're dependent on your outcome to feel success and a greater sense of self, well, that's problematic because, I mean, in the surfing world, can you really rely on the judges to give you the score, the ocean to provide the wave, and your competitors not to do better than you? That's a tough thing to rely your sense of self on. But there needs to be a balance, and everyone is different. This is the unique specificity of everyone, that not for this just generalized approach of this works for everyone, but there's an individual approach to what is the correct balance for me for my level of obsessiveness, balancing off my ability to sustain myself, support myself, encourage myself, uplift myself in these situations. And when we say that, are they broken? Well, maybe that particular moment, that person.
Broken is a harsh way to say
it. It is, but in that particular moment, they might be in a state of overwhelm, burnout, overtraining, and yes, that balances out. Absolutely. And everyone's different. Like, you look at Ash Barty, she's retired at 26, something like that, right? Mid-20s. It was the right time for her. She'd achieved some of the stuff that she really wanted to achieve. And then she's like, no, I'm not obsessive to then go and do all these different things. And that was the right move for her. And some people might go, yeah, but she left so much on the table. Yeah, but she knew her values. She knew what was important to her, and she caught it there. And then you got Kelly Slater, who's 50, still on tour. Now, I can't speak to his balance and his sustainability of what's going on, but some people have that extreme drive and that competitiveness to keep doing and keep going. And you look at the greats like Michael Jordan as well, is this crazy competitiveness. Now, obviously, there's the other side of this crazy competitive drive, is that people have said some interesting things because of their experience of playing with him and what that competition is like.
Did you watch the documentary? How did you view him when he was getting interviewed in that?
Ultimate competitor.
Do you think he was still holding on to it, though?
I don't know if he was holding on to it. He was definitely reliving the glory days, for sure. But I think what you have is, like, to be not only the best in the world, but to be the greatest of all time, like, that's the elite of the abnormality scale, right? Is you have an abnormal human. And so for us to view it in the lens of, oh, why isn't he like the people I know, or what I think is normal, is just a flawed lens to view it in, because the guy's the greatest of all time. And so it does make it challenging to put our morals and views on that, because it's just completely different. We don't know what it's like to be so insanely driven to be the greatest of all time and then actually achieve that and do that. That's just a different realm.
And the tax you have to pay.
Yeah,
to,
the tax you have to
that.
pay.
Yeah.
There's a huge tax that goes with that. Now, did he always get the balance right? Maybe not, right? But it's undeniable he's the greatest of all time, and there's a cost to that. So I think that's for and I'm not going to comment on that. That's for the individual to work out of knowing themselves. And that's why I think it's really important that people look at their values, what they want to be about, what they want to be remembered for. It makes making decisions, tough decisions in the moment, on the court, in the field, in the competition easier, as well as outside of that.
I think that's a great point. If you go back to your core values, and if you know what they are, then the decision should be easy because you just follow them.
Yeah.
If you don't know your core values, of course you're going to make the wrong decisions because you don't know, like, your morals and I guess your values are like your kind of map to the life you want to live. And if you're not following that map, you're probably going to get lost a lot of the time.
Absolutely. And that's the best analogy. I say values are directions, like a compass. And the point is that, like a compass, it's not an end point. It's the difference between goals and values, is that your goals should be in service of your values, right? The point is that you can't achieve it. It's a continuous, it's like heading north. Your value is north. Can't ever achieve north.
You're just climbing a mountain with no peak.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just got to keep climbing.
Yeah. And values kind of get a little bit, people hear it all the time, but they don't really understand how to do it and the power of it. It's like, really think about what you want to be about, what's important to you. One exercise that I tell some of my clients to do is, one, you can write your own obituary, which is kind of wild, or write an acceptance speech to when you're a Hall of Fame, whatever, right? What would you want people to say about you after you've finished up?
That's a question I normally ask at the end of this podcast, and people go, "Oh, I haven't thought about that."
Yeah.
And I just ask, "How do you want to be remembered when you go?"
Yeah.
And people don't think how they want to be remembered, but I'm like, how you live every day is how you're going to be remembered.
Exactly.
So to not think about how you live every day is kind of, it's so obvious when you say it like that, but when people hear it, they're like, I'm like, you shouldn't have to really think about it. You should just say, how do I show up for people every day?
Yeah.
Because that's how they're going to remember you.
And if you know your values, they should be evident in the behaviors that you do every day.
Yeah.
The other exercise I say is that if someone goes, I want to be world champ, I want to be the best. Like, cool, what does that look like? And it's normally some surface level stuff around, I've got to work hard and do this. And it's like, no, let's actually do a visualization exercise that you have just become the world champ. Who are you in that moment? What are you like? What are you about? What do people talk about you? Let's actually spend time filling out world champion you, world champion Dean. What does that look like? Who is that person? Because if we want to achieve something and get to something and achieve greatness, we have to know what that looks like to start setting the pathway to get there.
And do you think also, why do you want to look like that?
And why? Yeah. Absolutely, right? Why is that important to be there? What's the drive? What's the motivation? What's the whole reason that you're doing this? But so much as we've got this goal, and you can do that anything with life. I want to get promoted and be in this job. I want to have this type of relationship. I want to have this type of girlfriend, partner, wife. Okay, but who are you in that moment when you've got the perfect something? And perfect's maybe not the best word, but the thing that you really want. Like, who are you there? Because only when you work out who you are in that moment can you start putting the breadcrumbs together of actually how to get there. Otherwise, it's this arbitrary thing out there in the ether that you like and sounds great, but you actually don't know what it is. So we got to define it with great definition.
What do most athletes, people come back to you with when you kind of put that on them, that question about what do you look like in this situation? Why do you want to get to this situation?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think everyone's slightly different, but what does it look like, I think, first gets interpreted of maybe more external, superficial things, but it's like, no, who are you in that moment, I think is the important bit. The depth of what you experience in yourself. Like, who are you? What are you defined by in that moment? What do people define you by? That's a huge range of different things, and it's unique to everyone.
What about for you? Because we touched on before we started recording about how you were playing tennis, and that you went professional with tennis. What was, like, you obviously visualized probably a future in that of winning Wimbledon or whatever. How did you see yourself in those moments being in that place? Like, what was your why towards going towards something like that?
Well, firstly, I didn't know any of this stuff then.
Yeah, I know, but did you visualize back then when you were playing, or did you imagine the future, or were you just immersed in the fun of it and the competition and the joy of just like, I love doing this for what it is, not for where it could take me?
Yeah, I think I was hugely driven competitively. I think there was this drive to get better and improve. I think that's what it was. I don't think I really viewed the end result. I think it was more, I want to just keep improving the process every day and just wanted to win and find a way to win. Maybe that was the thing in the back of my mind that I was like, you're probably not cut out to actually make it at a high enough level. But I think I got the most out of my ability for I think what was on offer. It was never going to be the best.
Do you have brothers or sisters?
I got a twin sister.
Twin sister, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like most siblings are always got that competitive. Every time I find someone with a brother or sister, I'm like super competitive, no matter what field that may be in. It's just like from the moment they're born, they're like, all right, we got to fight for this now.
Yeah, it's interesting because someone asked me recently, are you still super competitive? So it depends. Depends what it is. Playing a lot of golf, playing with our mutual mate Joe, and we get really competitive, and it's great, and I love getting competitive playing golf. But I'd really try and not be as competitive in other areas of my life, because what I try and focus on is, does me doing well here or the other person doing the right thing, following the rules, whatever it is, the competitive context, is that getting in the way of the relationship? Because the relationship always has to be paramount. So put simply, Monopoly over Christmas with my family, they were super competitive. I wasn't because I knew that, like, I was focused on the relationship. I don't get to see my sister that often. She lives overseas. So that's paramount. And that needs to be in front of whether I win this competition or not. That's the way I frame it up, of being too over competitive in different situations. The relationship's always paramount.
I had a saying that I kind of brought it in and used it on my dad, because he was quite a smart man, and he'd get in arguments with my mum and over stuff that a lot of the time it would just be about like a fact or something, and he'd be right, she'd be wrong, and she'd be like, no, this is it, and they would get into like a big argument, but it would definitely be a bit of a back and forth, like obviously Monopoly and that. And I just got this thing, I'm like, would you rather be right, wrong, or happy? Yeah. And with the Monopoly and all that, would you rather win, lose, or be happy?
Yeah.
And in that point, it's like, just choose happy. Like, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Like, you can let go of those things. And it's hard with family, because I know family can put the knife in and twist it at times, but you just kind of got to be like, it doesn't matter. And it's like you said, letting go of that idea that this is bigger than it is, because it's not.
Yeah.
And if you do get that real competitive and want to flip the table and everything, you go, was that worth it over winning or losing Monopoly? And I think it's like, you got to be self-regulating enough to know, okay, what's the value here? And you go, doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
But that's a hard thing to do in the moment, especially around people that you actually do generally care about.
Well, absolutely. And some people go, how come I can do this in my workplace, but I can't do it with my spouse?
Do you love your spouse?
Yes. The more emotionally connected you are with someone, the more difficult it is to be more rational and regulate those emotions, because the emotional pathways are stronger and more integrated, right? So that limbic system of the brain is filling you full of these emotions that literally shuts down the frontal cortex in situations that goes, there's just a flood of cortisol, flood of chemicals. and you just get irate. You're like, how come I was so irrational? Also because you were so emotional. And that happens the more emotionally connected you are with people. So yes, there is a
So what's actually
skill.
that's good. I actually really it's nice to actually hear the rational sense of what this happens. So what gets flooded into your front cortex when you?
So it's called I call it just a hijacking of what's happening. So we've got the front brain, the frontal cortex, where we do all our higher order thinking. It's kind of like the CPU, our operating system, and we're fortunate compared to most other animals on the planet is that we've got a very large prefrontal cortex, which means that we can think forward in time, back in time. We can operationalize things in our brain, make rational sense of things, right? Very good for surviving, very good for making stuff and everything. But then it's got the detriment of, but now you know, now you're aware of things, and then it does all its other ruminating and whatnot. But when you go further back in the primal evolution is you got the limbic system in the midbrain. The limbic system is where you house all your emotions. So all mammals, or another name for it is the mammalian brain. So all mammals have a limbic system. So your pigs and your cows and your dogs, yes, they feel emotions. They feel distress. They feel worry. And so that's a whole nother other conversation around, I guess, our interaction and treatment of that. But the point is that the further back you go in the brain is the further back you go in evolution. So tends to be the more primal the experience comes out. So the emotions are released, the brain is firing in that midbrain. It then sends the chemicals and signals to the front brain to go, hey, this is an experience, this is something going on. Our frontal cortex then is just trying to make sense of what's going on, but it then gets hijacked because the chemicals are so strong, because further back you go is evolutionary saying you need to pay attention to this, right? So it's hard to then sometimes rationalize what's going on there. So literally at a chemical level, you're getting an increase in cortisol and adrenaline to try and deal with the emotional state you've got there, what's happening, right? So we are very much emotional beings. We should never forget that. We're like, oh, why isn't that person being rational or just think logically? It's like, yeah, but fundamentally, your emotions are the thing that really influences your experience.
Because I always would compare it to you making all this, just say you got a whiteboard and you're writing all these things down, well, what you should do, what you should say, how you should be. And then love or anger is kind of like the eraser, and it just rubs it all out. And then you go, oh, I had this massive plan, and then that comes and changes it all. And you say and do stuff that doesn't actually make any sense in the moment. But it's like love and anger are irrational. Like they're not, you can't, I feel like you can think of the best thing to do and then more love than anger, I find personally anyway, but you can come up with a plan of what you need to do. And then whether it's like, say for example, my mum, like she's the only person that can make me really angry, but I know because of the depths of love I have for that person that's why. And it can just wipe the whole thing of everything you think you need to say or do. It's just like, oh, but it's funny you say that's why, because it's just coming to flood.
Yeah. So I think that's the first step is becoming aware of it and acknowledging that it is a biological process that happens. And if we go back to one of the first questions around tools, is like, yes, this is a tool that we can use it in the context, whether you're trying to perform or trying to be in the best relationship with whoever, is you need to become aware of something before you can even look to change it. So let's not get all nihilistic and saying, oh, it's just chemicals and it's the primitive brain and I can't do anything about it. No, you can do something about it. What happens when we talk about hijacking is that there is then not a disconnect between who I am as a person and the thoughts and the emotions that I'm having. And that then becomes hooked, right? And we start responding from the point of view of the emotion. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. No, you're Dean. You have an experience outside of these thoughts and emotions. So the tool then is being able to firstly become aware of it. Secondly, to acknowledge that either your brain's just trying to do its job, right? It's trying to protect you. It's trying to make you aware of something. It's saying this is important, right? And then the third step then is to have a level of acceptance and distance. Psychologists call it cognitive diffusion. Can you get distance and separation from your thoughts and your feelings?
It's almost like viewing yourself as a third person.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you look at that from the Eastern practices, and that's where acceptance, commitment therapy, acceptance-based practices that we in the AIS really focus a lot on, it's really, it's third wave behavioral therapies, but it's come from the Eastern practices of mindfulness. What mindfulness is present moment awareness. Can you get a detachment from your experience internally to see it for what it is? And in another sense, it's going, can you connect to the observing self? There's a part of you that is the witnesser of the experience. And that's what meditation and mindfulness is really focusing on, is I can connect to my observing self, viewing the thoughts, the feelings and emotions as something that I have an intimate relationship with, but aren't directly me, that I can actually get distance from and see it and appreciate it.
It's like you analyze everything that's happening and actually through a lens of understanding instead of, I always say, like, when you're just so like you're on the merry-go-round and you keep going around and you keep going around, and then you hop off and you look at it and you go, oh my God, that's what's happening. That's where I'm going. Like, you see it. But if you don't separate yourself from that, like, when you're in something, it's so hard to see what you're in.
So hard.
It's like, as soon as you separate out, it's like when you see, just say a friend in a really bad relationship and you're seeing all the toxic stuff that's going on, and you're like, dude, you need to get out. Or you talk to a girl and like, you need to get out of that. That's horrible. But they're like, oh, it's not that bad, because like you're face to face. You're not, you haven't put yourself out far enough to see it all. You're kind of so in it, and then it comes back obviously to love and all the other stuff that is tied in. But like you say, being able to step outside of yourself and see it from that perspective, I think is a great tool. But what would you suggest people could do to help separate themselves from themselves in a way?
Great question. And there's really clear research on this. And I'll go through the research with you to answer this question, is that they had a bunch of participants that did a 3-month study, and they did a 12-minute mindfulness activity every day. And after 3 months, they saw new neural connections in the prefrontal cortex. Wild. So it's like, we didn't think that you could create neural connections, like kind of like, when you lift a weight. Why is the hypertrophy happening in the muscle belly? Well, because you're putting a stressor on those muscle fibers, and so the brain's going, hey, this is a stressor. We need to mitigate this for the future. So let's put some more muscle fibers there so it gets bigger and stronger, right? Well, lo and behold, that also happens in the brain. And there's a blood flow thing happening there. So there's more blood flow in the frontal cortex there. So it's recruiting more neural pathways. So in a simple sense, you're growing your brain from doing this protocol. Now, the protocol is super, super simple. Was you sit there, and I don't suggest people to start with 12 minutes, work your way up over the 3 months. You start with 2 minutes, and I've got a couple of athletes doing this at the moment too, is you start with 2 minutes, you close your eyes, and you simply bring your awareness to your breath, and you become wonderfully curious of the temperature of your breath. Is it slightly cooler as it goes in? Is it slightly warmer as it goes out? And you become like a curious scientist, like you've never experienced breathing before. And you just try and maintain your focus on your breath. Now, you will get distracted. That's your monkey mind saying, hey, think about this, think about that. That's totally normal. You will get distracted. It's when you then become aware, back to that first step, aware that you're distracted. You then acknowledge that you became distracted. That's your brain doing its normal thing. And then you return back to the breath. You take action. So I kind of say it's a AAA thing that I talk to my athletes about. If you're out in the water, aware, acknowledge, and take action, right? So the action is then back to the breath. So you will get distracted hundreds of times. That's normal. So what you're actually training is the awareness of when you lose focus, which is important in everyday life, but especially in performance. You're then practicing the acknowledgement that this is all normal, that you get distracted. And then you're practicing the refocusing back to action, refocusing and refocusing and refocusing. So it's not about being completely focused on one thing the whole time. It's, can you refocus? Because your brain is literally designed to detect threats. That's how you survive. That's a biological mechanism that is very, very normal. So it's not like you're just going to be hyper-focused in this flow state the whole time. It's like, no, stuff pops up and that's fine. That's normal. Can you refocus? So that's a very simple thing that everyone can do. They can just sit there, and it has wonderful benefits for work as well. It's like you got to sit there and focus on getting a spreadsheet done or whatever. People say, oh, I get really distracted. It's like, you can train that. And some of the, when I work in the clinical space and my ADHD patients as well, it's, yes, there's a chemical imbalance because it's a neurodevelopmental disorder, and we can look at the medication stuff around that, but they don't have a very good ability to refocus. They get very distracted. So that task is very hard for an ADHD person. So we very much go slowly and work up to it. But it's the refocusing that's important.
I guess you can compare that when you're in the gym and you're doing just say like bench press. You do 5 reps and you go, I've got no more, and you put it back on the bench. And you wait a little bit and you go, all right, I can go again. But a lot of people just go, no, it's too heavy, and they give up. I guess that's the whole refocusing thing. It's like you're training your mind to go back, even though it's like, okay, you've been focused in on this breath, and I guess like it's just being present in that moment of being able to focus in on, because like you say, people get scared when you say 12 minutes. It's like,
it's a long time.
And you're like 12 minutes to focus in on.
Start with 30 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. Like the steps to build into that, like start small and go big. And it's so funny how most of the time you tell someone, do it for 30 seconds, and they'll probably end up doing it for 5 minutes. But they need that, almost that cue that it's like, I'd trick myself. I'd be like, oh, I only need to hop in the ice bath for 2 minutes, and I'd always stay for 10. But I needed to tell myself 2 minutes to get me into it. But then once I'm in it, you're in it. And I guess that's like you're saying, when you deal with people, if you tell them 12 minutes, like, oh, it's too long. I can't focus for 12 minutes. And you go, okay, we'll just do 30 seconds. And they just need that little push into that 30 seconds where they go, this is actually quite nice. I'm breathing, I'm focused on my body. Oh my God, it's been 10 minutes. Great. But I guess it's like you're saying, don't, like little bites kind of thing at a time. Do you find that when you're dealing with people, it's just that you need to balance that you're giving them good things to do, but you need to give it to them in a way that they can actually digest and take on board without just being overwhelmed by it?
Yeah, well, if we take a step back and actually look what's happening cognitively there, is that there's a cognitive threshold to do something either new or discomforting. And that has a caloric expenditure that goes with it. Why we are creatures of habit is because biologically we've learned that calories are scarce. 99% of human existence it's been really hard to find food. It's just recently that there's an abundance, right? So at a cellular level, the whole body is designed to be super efficient when it comes to using calories. So that's why our brain puts these schemas together. So then you don't have to use calories, cognitive work, to be able to understand what's going on. So when you go to a restaurant, you don't stand on the table or you do something weird. You don't even think about it. You've put this schema together.
I was going to say, don't you live with Joe McDonald? This could be a real possibility.
Oh, mate, that guy, yeah. I don't know what he's doing sometimes. So maybe he's got some different schemas to you and I.
No, I get what you're saying.
Joe's going to love that. But yeah, definitely. It's so understanding that your brain's trying to be super efficient. So doing things that you haven't thought about, or that's not a habit, or that's different, uses more energy than it has to the baseline, right? So you've then got to break through that threshold. So if you then go, if I'm at 0, if I don't work out at all during the week, I'm 100% sedentary, I don't work out, and now I've got this desire, this dream to work out and be wonderfully fit and healthy, and you start with 4 days a week or even 3 days a week, like that shift from the foundation of nothing the threshold, both physically, cognitively, and from a caloric point of view, is massive. So you got your whole body going, oh, this sucks. Don't do that. And so then we don't get the reinforcement. And then there's a dopamine challenge there with going, well, I'm now suck at this. I'm not good at this. This hurts and I'm tired and sore. Why would I want to keep doing this? Whereas if you can use that dopamine, which dopamine, I think people misunderstand, is that it's not the pleasure molecule. It's more a drive and motivation molecule, right? It's do this more. And so when you get a hit of dopamine, it's going to give you a whole lot of drive to do that thing again. And so if you look at that and use that from the point of view we're talking about with the gym context, is if you start with a 10-minute workout and you go, I'm going to do a 10-minute workout, that's all I'm going to do this week. Now, what is the threshold for you to move past that physically and cognitively? Super low, 10 minutes. I'm going to do a basic, not even a HIIT workout, I'm just going to do one exercise, right? We're taking the extreme. You then achieve that. There's a release of dopamine, maybe some endorphins because you've done something slightly challenging. You are then going to be more motivated, going to have higher drive to do that again because you've achieved it and it felt good, right? So then maybe you're sore, so you wait a few days and then you do 10 minutes again and you build it up super, super, super slowly. People jump in the deep end all the time. And, the end of year or the start of the year, New Year's resolution, I'm going to do this, and they burn themselves out. Well, we're changing dietary habits or whatever. It's like there's a reason why you haven't done all this beforehand. There's some sort of good reasons, barriers to it. Start super small, get some wins, get that snowball getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then all of a sudden you're 6 weeks in and you're working out 4 days a week.
And also make it easy for you to get those little wins as well. Like put things in place in your house or take things out of your house that are bad habits or things that like pull you into those and just have those. So like this is just something I do. If I want to go running in the morning, I get all my clothes out that I'm going to run in, put my shoes there, put my socks, and they're right next to my bed. And just that little thing, I know if obviously that's not a hard thing to do, but if I wake up at 4:30 or something and I've got to go in my wardrobe, pull out my clothes, find my shoes, like that little bit of resistance can sometimes be enough to go, oh no, it's too hard.
Yeah.
So it's like if you can find those little things to then add to like that 10-minute workout or wherever it may be, or get a friend. Friend's like, I feel like if you put someone in it with you, you're way more likely, like we're saying, I've been running with Cooper. I know if Cooper's like, we're going running in the morning, I'll be up. And I don't know if you can speak on this, but if I tell someone I'm going to do something like wake up and go for a run, I'm more awake in the morning. Now, I don't know if there's something releasing in my body, but if I commit to something, without a doubt, every time I'll wake up more awake or more like ready. So almost do you find, when you have to catch a flight or something, do you find that if your body clock comes on, do you know what that is inside you that almost that thing, I guess it comes back to that somewhat not worry, kind of worry. Like you don't obviously worry you're going to miss your flight or you're going to let a friend down or something. Do you find there's that thing that kind of is in your body? I'm not sure if there's a chemical or something releases to push you into doing something like that.
Yeah. I mean, the main chemical, the culprit there is cortisol for sure. But it comes back to the perception of what's important. And if something's important to you, then chemically your brain will mobilize you to take action. And so, you're going to get a hit of that. But when you wake up as well, there is an increase in cortisol and a decrease in melatonin too, because you're waking up through those sleep cycles. But in general, if something, and that's what's important, it's important to you. If you have a perception that it's important, your brain is going to start mobilizing you to take action towards that thing.
How important is it to teach people that if you have fear towards something, normally you're on the right path? Do you get what I mean? I had this thought the other day where I've been trying to like have more quotes, but I'm like, fear is normally opportunity wrapped in a difficult situation.
Yeah.
But it's getting across to someone that if you feel fear or you feel it's hard, you're probably on the right track. But it's almost, how do you get that across to someone to be like, but I'm scared. I'm like, you're scared because you care, that you're invested in this. Like that fear is a prerequisite to achieving the thing you want to achieve. But how would you find the best way to almost convince someone of that and then help them deal with that to achieve it?
Yeah, let's firstly acknowledge that there's a parameter too, is that nothing is good in total abundance, right? You can literally overdose on water, right? Hyponatremia. It's too much water, but water is the essence of life, right? So you got to understand or acknowledge the framework in which you can look at that, because fear is a very highly motivating emotion. It has a huge response in the brain because fear is, hey, there is a serious problem here. We need to mitigate this, move away from this and whatever. And we hear about the fear response and we go into fight, flight or freeze, right? So I certainly don't want to be saying to people, do stuff that generally makes you scared and fearful. It's like, well, hang on, there might be a good...
There's a limit, yeah.
There might be a good safety thing they're doing. And I feel like yourself and what you do, it's like, that to me is just crazy. Like, you've got a different thing in your brain that you're not as fearful of going crazy fast downhill when there's trees and whatnot like that. Or like the pro surfer, that it's triple overhead and there's sharp reef below and you're like...
Why am I here?
Exactly. So I think it's important to acknowledge, again, with that self, that there is a benevolent intent behind what it's trying to say, right? So firstly, we're going, why am I fearful of this thing? Is there a good, genuine reason that I should avoid this situation? Because we definitely look at avoidance a lot in sport and performance, and we definitely say that it's the root cause of a lot of problems, and it is. But sometimes avoidance is good. It's only avoidance is bad as if it's getting in the way of you doing something that's beneficial and productive, right? So sometimes it's like, yeah, there's a fear for that because you probably shouldn't do it. That's your brain going, threat detection, right? But to your point, you're going, is it good that people move towards fear and difficulty? And I think that's probably a better way to look at it, is going, there's a huge benefit to move into uncomfortable, difficult situations. The thing that mediates both directions of that is going, is it important to you? And this comes back to knowing your values, knowing your why. Why are you doing it, right? If you're going up to a ledge on a bridge and you want to jump off it because you want to impress your mates and there's a bit of fear and you go, yeah, but Dean said I've got to move towards fear and I'm going to jump off this bridge. I'm going, but what is that in service of? And who is that in service of, right? But like Pipe was just on, and I was working with a lot of athletes at Pipe and Sunset. And some of the female athletes hadn't spent a whole lot of time at Pipe, and there's some genuine fear and alarm bells going because I've just seen Kyle Lenny's helmet and split in half, and he's one of the best big wave surfers of all time. So there's some genuine fear there that goes, yeah, but there's these boils and these reef, and it's triple overhead. One way to first look at that is going, what is my why? Like, why am I out here? Why am I doing this? What's my reason? What's my values? It's like, well, if I want to be the world's best surfer and if I want to move towards this dream of achieving surfing success, then that's what's driving me. So a simple way to go is, am I moving towards or am I moving away from what I want to be and what my values are? And you can even do that back to the example with the exercise. You wake up in the morning, yeah, my shoes aren't ready and whatever. Am I moving away or towards? That's a very simple exercise that everyone can do. But in terms of the benefits of moving towards that fear or moving towards that difficulty, is that actually also is under the willpower sort of area, is a part of the brain that can be trained and that area of the brain can grow. So difficult things become easier as a feedback loop the more you push into things that you don't want to do, or things that you do want to do and then you don't do it, right? It goes both ways. So you can definitely train the brain to do that. So the benefit of moving into difficulty is there's an adaptation from stress, and then you become better and stronger at dealing with that.
And then just knowing that if you've trained for it, life's going to hit you with it when you probably least expect it. So at least if you do the training for it, when it does hit you, you go, oh, I've been doing the reps for this. This is easy to deal with. And if it comes out of nowhere and you go, okay, I haven't dealt with this before.
Yes, there's the competence part, but I think sometimes we run the risk of just going, let's just focus on exposure, right? Let's just do, and that is a type of therapy, exposure therapy, if you're looking at different fears. Right? If you go on, they're fearful of spiders, there's a graded exposure, which is a type of therapy. But I think exposure purely by itself, without looking at the cognitions and belief behind the person, can sometimes be detrimental, but probably more just not as effective. Right? If I just said to the surfer, just go out there and have a ton of time at pipe and surf it a ton of times, are they going to be less fearful? Sure. Probably. Yeah, they've just had so much exposure that there's a level of comfortability in huge triple overhead back door, right? But if we've only got 4 or 5 weeks leading up to it, and there's a big competition, so there's competition as well as fear of actually being out there, and we want to not just not be fearful out there, but have something else, maybe excitement and drive to actually go and commit to doing the difficult thing. Let's look at why you're fearful. And again, everyone has a specific way of doing fear, specific way of doing anxiety. So I will then go and look at that and find what those ingredients are of why you're fearful of that. Because in the endeavor of finding the beliefs and the rationale behind the fear is where we can start integrating that into the self that also wants to perform. And that's the harder work. No one wants to do that. That's difficult. But again, it comes back from that fundamental understanding of the psyche that there is a benevolent intent behind every maladaptive behavior. And what that means is that there's a good reason that you do shitty things, right? That there is a good reason from the brain's point of view, even anxiety. There's some good reason that you're anxious. The brain is trying to make you more something. It's my job to go in there and find what that something is and help you integrate that. But you didn't wake up, you weren't born anxious. You weren't born fearful. Something happened that your brain said, that's not good. Let's not have that happen again. Let's make you hyper aware of it. In the anxiety thing, it might be that you've learned the consequences of not doing something well. Social anxiety, not doing something well in public. You've learned how much that sucked. So your brain is then going, as a defense mechanism, let's get it right. We have to get it right. We have to say the right thing in this setting. Otherwise, there's big consequences. The maladaptive result, or the negative consequence of that, is that there's this increase in cortisol, adrenaline, the heart beats faster, whatever your specific way of that, or you freeze, or whatever. That is the defense mechanism going, this is a difficult situation, right? And so looking at that specifically for the person is how you then move through that. And that actually creates a neurological change in the brain. That's what good psychotherapy is then when you understand that and you integrate that with the other part of the self, there becomes a neurological change where there's literally new neurological pathways created, new cognitions and beliefs that then you can move through that. I don't think a lot of people understand and appreciate that from a good psychology level.
Did you have to go through something like that at some point in your life where you had to pinpoint something that you might have not even known at the time, and then being like, oh shit, I need to work through this and figure this out?
Yeah. And then I went and saw, my supervisor as a therapist as well. Yeah.
Do you mind touching on what that situation was, or the thing was that you had to work through?
Yeah, I mean, you have some stuff pop up, and then you're a bit worried and concerned about some things, but it doesn't work too well when you're trying to do it yourself. And I think that's a big thing that I had to work through, is just going, I'm a psych, I should know this. Nope. No, it doesn't work at all really well to yourself, because, as you said before, you're not aware of it. And I think that's another good reason of if you have the resources and the ability and privilege to see a clinician, is that you're not aware of what you're not aware of. It's subconscious for a reason. You're not aware of that. So finding a good clinician that can make you aware of that stuff and work through it, I think is really beneficial.
Because it's those traumas and programming that we have, especially obviously from being a kid. Like, I remember when I was a kid, I was terrified of snakes.
Yeah, right.
And I was kind of like, why am I so scared of snakes? Like, I'm not scared of spiders. I'm not scared of like, I'm just nothing. It's just snakes. I'm like, feel it in my body. And I thought back a little while ago now, but since I was born, my parents were always like, snakes are bad. Don't go near snakes. They'll bite you. Like, they just programmed, which I grew up on a farm. There's snakes that'll kill you. Like, you should be scared of snakes. Don't go and touch them, kind of thing. But they programmed me to be terrified of snakes. And it was crazy. Like, it was literally in my body. I'd see one and I'm like, oh my God, like that's so bad that that's like still a thing. And once, like you say, you get that awareness of understanding it and go, okay, I don't want this fear to control me. I don't want this programming to be. And it took me a long time. I actually lived with a guy who had a pet python.
Oh wow, now that's exposure.
And I'd see it every day. And I was like, I want to hold this thing. And I lived with him for, I think, 3 years. And it was like every day I'd look at literally a fear in my body. And it took me 3 years. And then one day I'm like, I'm just going to get it out. And I wanted him to be there to help me, but he was away at the time. And I just opened the cage and just got it out and just held it. And It was like a big moment for me to actually overcome that, because I was terrified, man. I was so scared of this thing. And I was just like, I want to beat it. I want to fuck the programming, stuff what they said. Like, I want to actually be able to overcome that. And then the relief that you feel leave your body in those situations where you have a phobia or fear or something that's like traumatized you, and you can just like lean into that and then feel it and go, oh, it's like a weight's lifted off you. And that was just this small interaction. And like, I still didn't, like, I'm not stoked on snakes, but just to have that one of like, okay, I can hold them and I can be okay with that, was such a relieving feeling. But like you say, it's like you store it in your body. And I think a lot of people, and you'd probably see this with athletes, like they'll be storing something in their body, and whether that's fear or stress or anger, that whatever it is that's stored, like, will slowly, I feel like, kill you in some way. And you see people get like tumors and cancer and all these different things in their body, and it's through holding on to something. And I always compare it to, of Harry Potter, like, he's got the scar and it's like he's got that little bit of Voldemort in him.
Right.
I compare that to that's anger, that's resentment, that's all this stuff. Like, you carry that with you, and it's not until you find a way to release that you'll actually feel like how you probably should feel. But that's like someone like you can come along and, like you say, you follow those breadcrumbs back and you find out, okay, these things happen and those things happen, and you kind of find the source of it, and then be like, oh shit, I didn't even know that's where it stemmed from.
Well, and that's why we go back in time. People go, why do you go back to my childhood? It's like, it doesn't necessarily need to be the childhood, but there is a point in time when you learned the importance of doing something or not doing something. So if we go back to your specific case, there was a point in time where your parents said something about snakes. What do you remember them first telling you about snakes?
Don't go near them. They're dangerous. They'll bite you. You can die. Like,
so when you have your primary caregiver, being your parent, who, as a kid, that's the highest authority. They are my dad, my mum. They are the chief protectors that keep me safe. when they tell me that something could kill me, I'm listening, right? Your brain is going, they know their shit. I'm listening to them. So then you had this belief that snakes are so bad that they could kill you, right? So then what was your relationship to whenever you then saw a snake?
I literally, my body would go into shock.
Yeah.
Like I'd physically be like it's the only thing that I would see that would make me almost like freeze, and then like I just had no control pretty much on my entire body. I just go, like,
so you would freeze, and everyone's slightly different. So the freeze mechanism is quite interesting in mammals because, and have you seen like those fainting goats?
yeah.
It's funny, but what it is this relationship to predation or this response to the possibility of being eaten, right? So you could fight the threat, fight the tiger. I could run away from the tiger, or I could freeze, which is really playing dead because I don't think the tiger wants to eat a dead thing. That's what the freeze is from, right? And everyone's different based on their hereditary and their genetic makeup and whatnot. For whatever reason, yours was like, let's just freeze. But you're not consciously going, the snake's not going to want to eat me if I'm freezing, right?
I normally freeze and then run like hell.
And then you run,
yeah.
right?
But there was that initial just like, and then I just couldn't control that.
Yeah. And so the brain is preparing you it's mobilizing you to take action. It's going, this is a very serious situation. This is life or death because my primary protector has told me this is life or death. So we need to upregulate our heart rate, our cortisol. We need to be ready to deal with this life-threatening situation. And then you run like hell, right? And if we took blood markers, we'd see all those different chemicals increase. So it's appreciating, firstly, and acknowledging that is that a good thing that someone is trying to keep you safe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
So your parents, what was their reason for telling you that snakes are bad?
Didn't want me to go pat one.
Yeah, they said, they're like, I'm trying to protect you.
Yeah.
So is being protected and safe a good thing?
Yeah.
So everyone deserves to feel safe and protected, right? Now, if we take that to extreme and I say to you, hey, Dean, let's say that you've told me that safety and protection is absolute paramount. We need to keep you safe. And you agree that's really important. That's a good thing. Your parents taught you that. Let's now say that we now need to make sure that Dean is super safe and protected. So we're actually going to say you're never allowed to go out into the bush, never allowed to go out into nature. And actually, let's make it that you really just have to stay in your house. And you're not allowed to leave the home. We're going to bubble wrap everything, and we're going to make sure we keep you safe and protected. What would you say to that?
Kind of turns into the bubble boy, doesn't it?
Bubble boy.
Yeah.
But would you be up for that?
No.
Why not?
Because then I feel like he'd lose. I guess this whole thing is like we need adversity and hard things to happen to us to make us who we should be. It's like if you want someone to be the person they should be, you kind of need to let go of them.
Yeah.
And it's that thing of letting go of, especially, like, I don't know how that would feel for a child, but I'm sure that would be a pretty daunting challenge to be like, okay, here's the world. Good luck. We're here if you need us, but yeah.
Exactly. Because when you go bubble boy and we have a joke about it and there's this immediate push away in your body language as well, what is off-putting about bubble boy wrapped in the house? What's the cost of it?
I think not becoming who you probably should be. I feel like I was talking about this. We get so, like, no one wants hard things to happen to them. But then if you look back, all the hard things that ever happened to you have made you who you are now. And if you're happy with who you are now, would you want to change those hard things? And you say, like, do you want to get wrapped in bubble wrap and nothing ever go wrong? It's like, I think it's so funny. We all want perfection. And then you get, like, the perfect doesn't exist anyway. But then you say, I want the perfect person. I'm like, they don't exist. And I'm sure if you got the perfect person, you'd probably get bored with them really quick and want someone else. if you want the perfect life or the easiest life, or like you don't want to go through these things, then you're never actually gonna, again, use the word, find the tools or find the things. 'Cause I don't think you're ever gonna understand who you are until you get tested, like properly tested, whether that's physically, emotionally, mentally, whatever that it may be. So I think you need those things as much as you probably don't think you want them in those points of time when you're at the lowest. It's like that's when you actually figure out, okay, well, who am I? What do I want? And where do I want to go? When you're not in those points, I feel like it's hard to actually get that. So
Right. So there's this desire and importance around choice and being challenged. And if you just wrap me in cotton wool, then I don't get the choice to push into challenge, and that's important to you as well.
Massive, yeah.
Right? So even in that, we've just seen the two desires, right? And now there's a bunch of different steps to then go after that. But acknowledging the fact that there's a part of you that wants choice and to push into adversity and difficulty and find where you are in life, that then is trying to also have this battle with this other part that says, yeah, but safety and protection is important too. I think just simply looking at that and understanding that, well, yeah, that's probably the start to this avoidance of snakes, right? And going, now what do I want choice? So then you mobilize that choice. You said, no, I don't want this. I like choice. Choice is great. It's one of my favorite things. And moving into challenge and adversity. So you did it yourself, right? You went to that enclosure, the tank, and you grabbed out the snake, and you're like, yeah, because choice is more important, and I can keep myself safe because python or whatever, you know, which is really, really interesting. So I think the importance there is understanding where the fear eventually or initially started from, and trying to then look at those beliefs against, because there's a response, right? You're not fearful and anxious in a vacuum. What I mean by that is, if there was only the version of you that was fearful and anxious, you'd be running around like a mad hatter going, I'm fearful and I'm anxious and whatever. There's a response that comes back to the other self and says, yes, but. There's a but. And the but is the breadcrumbs to then working on how to integrate that part of the self, right? There's this but of, yeah, but I've got this dream for something more. You wanted choice over what you wanted to do. You didn't want to be held to this fear, right? Cool. That's we can work with that. The yeah, but with the athlete at pipe, that they could just go, yeah, well, I'm totally fearful. It's triple overhead and it's crazy, but when the but is super important, and we don't take enough notice to that, because the but is really getting to the why and the drive of actually why you're out there in the first place. Otherwise, you never even paddle out.
I think we should do hard things for no other reason but to see how we react to those hard things. Not because you could get like a like on Instagram, not because people will see you do it. Just do something hard and then see what comes out of yourself and how that makes you feel from doing that hard thing.
Absolutely.
Because do you find so many times now that people do hard stuff so they can get the photo, so they can tell their friends, so they can, like, it's almost the reaction from doing the hard things. Again, the external is why they do the hard thing, not the internal. Do you find that's become more common now? And do you feel like you see people doing it for that? And I guess you're never going to be like a Kelly Slater or someone that is doing it for the external. Like, he's obviously got some internal drive that just keeps him going to this point, where a lot of other people, once the external runs out, they don't have it anymore.
Again, people don't do things for no reason, right? And they go, well, why are they doing it for external reasons for other people? It sounds like that's what you're saying. Like, why are they doing it for the image or for the likes and whatnot? Well, there's a very good reason that they're doing it, and it's slightly different for each person. But there's this social currency that goes with social influence. Now, that has an evolutionary hangover to it as well. It's going, if I'm up the social hierarchy, like take apes, for example, if I'm up the social hierarchy, then I have more options for resources, for food, for reproduction rights. So being up the social hierarchy is a survival mechanism, right? So how that's then formed in today's society is that the amount of likes that I get is inferred as a direct correlation to where I am on the social hierarchy, and therefore whether I should be worried about survival or not.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. So that can get, again, anything can get maladapted, but that can get a bit problematic if we then value our sense of self on the perception of this social hierarchy of everyone else. This has very much become apparent because it's a quantifiable thing. I get the amount of likes. I get the amount of shares, downloads, whatever. Or I get the comments, or I get the trophy at the end of the day. They're all outcome-based things that I can easily quantify my level of social influence in the world. Very problematic when we're such a global world now, right? But that then opens you up to a whole lot of things that you don't have much control over. You don't have any control over what people think about you. If they want to like you, great. If they want to like you, that's also their problem, you know? So I think it's important to be self-sustaining in our sense of worth. Because if you predicate your sense of self, your sense of your self-worth on an outcome or what someone thinks about you or the amount of likes, then you're opening yourself up to a whole lot of potential hurt that you don't have any control over. It's just bad maths, really.
I want to tie this in as well because I want to lead on from that, where the influence of parents, especially on athletes beginning in sports, and again, what you just said, you could use that and put it straight into the parent category, but then that comes back to the primary caregiver.
Yeah.
Who cares what they think? Well, they've got me to here. They're obviously the people I love the most in the world. How have you found dealing with parents that either don't care or care too much when it comes to athletes in sport?
I deal with a lot of, especially in an individual sport like surfing and with tennis, a lot of the time the caregiver or the parent is also the coach. So, yeah, I've done a lot of work around this.
I've done a little bit as well, and it's
now the reason is so if you look at it going, why is it super, super rare that you can have a parent be parent and coach and have a strong relationship with the kid? Why is that super rare? And I think what it comes down to is the two roles are fundamentally very different for how the athlete or the kid perceives it, right? Is that your relationship, say, with your father is one of what is the number one thing you want from your dad?
Me personally? Probably love and support.
Love and support. Perfect. Exactly. All I want is dad's love and support, right? That's fundamental. And so if I then do some behaviors in competition that are then perceived and communicated that aren't good from dad, even if it's not at a conscious level, a lot of it is at a subconscious level, I'm then going, my performance then influences the amount of love and support I get from dad. So now there's this currency of, if I perform, I get more love and support. And if I don't perform, I now don't get as much love and support. So it's this conditional relationship that goes with parent and kid. And all the kid wants, and we're all kids at the end of the day, we just want our parent to love and support us. So having that taken away from us is so difficult. So everyone deals with it differently. But sometimes it's a whole lot of internal pressure, because if I don't perform well, I get less love from dad. Now, that's not consciously the thought very often, but subconsciously it's, I really want to have approval from my parent. And it's not to say it's one person's fault or the other. The parent could not be actively trying to make the performance or the love conditional, but it's the perception of the kid that there is conditions to this love and support.
You get excited when he wins, you get bummed when he loses. Like,
Yeah.
that's something that a kid could take
Exactly.
different ways.
So then also on top of that, if you look at the role of the coach, what's the main role of the coach to the athlete?
Teach, put wisdom, technique,
Right.
training, all those things.
Exactly. So there's a criticality that goes with the relationship. My role is to provide insight into your performance, technique, tactics, whatever. I've got to be critical of what you're doing. So there is a judgment of what you're doing for me to then help you to make you better, right? So then if dad then jumps into that coach role, fundamentally there's an analysis on performance, and there is then these conditions that then pop up, because from time to time a coach needs to be quite directive, because a coach can't just be, oh, you're doing great the whole time. No, sometimes there needs to be a little bit of, hey, you're completely off here. We need to do this, this, and this. Yeah, there's this honesty, right? So now in a good athlete to coach relationship, there's this trust built in there, and that there is this honesty, and they've got the balance between encouragement and accountability right. But again, if that kid then goes, I don't know which role dad's in at a subconscious level, because he's trying to give me feedback. He's just trying to be a good dad. He's just trying to give me feedback because he wants me to surf well. It's well intended. He wants me to be better. He's super proud of me. He wants me to achieve all the dreams. In doing that, he goes, I need to be critical here. I need to give some feedback to Johnny because he didn't do well here. Well intended. But then the kid, the athlete, then interprets, oh, I've done something wrong. Now there could be conditions on this love and support. So it's extremely hard to do. And I tend to try and never give absolutes in anything in psych. But being a parent and coaching in an individual sport is one of the closest things that I'll just say, just don't. Just don't. If you've got the resources and the privilege, because I understand that not everyone has that privilege to be able to use an external coach.
Have you?
But if you can do.
Have you read Owen Wright's book?
No, I've been meaning to. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just started that, and literally what we're touching on, his dad coached him, and spoiler alert, but like that relationship went as you can imagine, and fell apart, and then it also affected the rest of his relationship with his family and his wife and everyone else because of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you say, how do you balance that love, support, caring, honesty, judgment, all bottled into a kid?
Yeah.
Like he's a kid when he's competing, and you've got all that to try to deal with and understand. And dealing with, I've seen parents that are too pushy to their kids, and I'm just like, well, you're going to burn out. Wait till you're 18 and you're probably never going to do this again. And a lot of the time that's how it goes. As soon as they turn 18, they're like, I've got my license. I can do what I want. Parents don't have as much control over me anymore. See ya.
Yeah.
And you see it more times than not. It's like, it's that balance of caring for your kids and giving them the tools, but then also giving them the freedom to do what they want to do. And I guess people wrap around, like their intention is good.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I went into this with good intention. I'm like, yeah, but you can still get a bad result out of good intention. If you're
Definitely.
pushing someone too hard, because you probably, most of the time I think they either didn't quite make it where they wanted to in the sport or did what they want to do. So they're living through their kids, and then they reflect their disappointment in themselves into their kids. And then that messes up that relationship, however it does. But you're putting too much pressure on them to live the life that you wish you lived. And I just don't think that's fair on either of you.
No, absolutely not. And so what I say to the parents is that firstly, the love and support has to be unconditional. Please, 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 please do not put conditions on your love. Love has to be unconditional from caregiver to child. Because if it's not, then there's fundamentally a problem with that kid to then feel safe in the world. Has to be foundational. You cannot put conditions on the kid or love conditions based on outcome. Firstly, it's cruel because does the kid have total control over the outcome? Especially in surfing. There's so much subjectivity with the judging, the randomness of the ocean. Like, please don't put those sort of conditions. The kid doesn't have full control over the outcome, and you're changing your love and support based on something they don't have control of. That's not fair, right? Secondly, what relationship do you want to have with your kid? Like, back to the other conversation we had, relationship is paramount. Always, always, always have in the front of your mind in any relationship is paramount. It's more important than winning. It's more important than being right. We get caught up with being right a lot.
Yeah, we do.
And you can do a basic thing, was, will this matter in a minute's time? Will this matter in an hour's time? Will this matter in a day's time? Sometimes it will matter in a day's time. So yeah, you might need to push into your beliefs there and your opinions.
Or just like choose your battles.
If it's not going to matter in an hour, mate, don't have that battle. So firstly, I say, make the love unconditional. Your role is first and foremost the parent. Never forget that, right? Secondly, is this idea around agency and choice and motivation. So when you said you've got that overbearing parent who maybe from well-intended things, or maybe they're projecting their own shortcomings in that particular area onto the kid, whichever way, they're going, hey, go and surf in the morning, go and ride the bike, go and hit more balls. Well-intended, but the problem with that is the kid then learns to outsource their motivation and drive to you as the parent. It's easy, and they're good at it. The parent's good at doing this drive and motivation. Hey, get up and surf. Now, sometimes there needs to be a little bit of kick in the butt, and teenagers sometimes get a little bit lazy and whatnot. But fundamentally, what you want to set up is a high sense of autonomy and agency for the kid to go and do the thing. And the analogy I like to use is a little bit like a fire, right? If the fire is the motivation and drive, if the caregiver is always putting more gas into that fire, trying to get it to light up, and they're the ones keeping the fire burning, what happens when they're not there? What happens when the kid turns 18 and they're on tour by themselves? So whatever happens that the caregiver can't keep fueling the fire, then the kid's got no ability to fuel his own fire. And he doesn't even know why there's a fire there in the first place, because dad always bloody did it.
Yeah, well, yeah, why am I even doing this?
Yeah.
Why is it?
And that's when we see a whole lot of burnout and fallout from different sports at 18, 19. Why am I doing this? My parent wanted me to do this. Yeah, and they motivated me. Now they're going, oh, might need to step away. Or you've had too much and you go, step away. And now all of a sudden we're going, why am I doing this and what do I do? So what I then talk to the coaches a lot about and the parents is really try and lean into empowering your child to make choice. Now, firstly, from a motivation and training point of view, that's really beneficial. Create choice and agency in your kid, so then they have that internal motivation. They know why they're doing it. They're driving their own ship. That's really good from just a general how to get people more motivated. But then if we fast forward from a performance point of view is, what do you need to do when you're out there in the water when it's triple overhead? What do you need to do in competition is you need to make difficult choices. You need to be decisive. So if we're making all the decisions for our kids and we're telling them what to do the whole time, how on earth can we expect them to make tough decisions when it matters most in front of everyone, when they care about it a lot? So if you just purely go from a performance point of view, is we need to grow autonomy and agency in our kids because they're the only ones out there performing at the end of the day. And so I see this crazy disconnect between people going, I need to be better. A lot of things athletes come to me is I need to be more decisive. I need to make better decisions. look at the rest of your life. Who's making all the decisions for you? Do you lean into or lean away from tough decisions? It's like, well, then we've got a disconnect. If you want to be better at making decisions in the water, go out there and practice making really tough, difficult decisions in life. Then we can go practice and do some pressure drills and get you better at making decisions in context in the water. But firstly, go do it for the rest of your life.
I guess that comes back to holistic approach to everything. It's like, I always tell people, you want to be a good athlete, just start living your life better.
Yeah.
It'll all bleed into each other. It's like, is your relationship good with your girlfriend? You're eating right, you're sleeping right, like you said, making the right decisions, because that will flow over into your sport, whatever that may be. But so many people focus on, I need to squat more, I need to do this more, I need to be out in the ocean more. And you're like, what's the point of going out in the ocean and surfing for 3 hours and then coming home and getting in a verbal argument with your missus every single night? It's like, where's your headspace going to be at that point? Yep. But people, not everyone, but obviously some people don't compare or put the two together as like, I'm really unhappy in all these spots, but then I'm really happy in one. But maybe if I was happy in all those, I'd be really good or really happy over here. Yeah, it's a tricky one.
Well, as Peterson says, get your house in order first.
Yeah, clean your room.
Yeah, if you want to go and be great in the world, get your house in order first, because it's foundational.
I feel like sometimes if my mind's cluttered, normally my room will be cluttered at the same time. It's like a direct representation of how I feel at the time. And you go, yep, that makes kind of sense. And then once that's clean, it's like, I'm clear. And then everything else is clear. How did you go from tennis? You went to America as well and competed. So how did you go from tennis and then find yourself in psych and then in psych in surfing? How was the transition between those things? Because I don't know many tennis, because you were professional as well with tennis.
Yeah, it was all right.
But how do you go from that and then the shift to here?
Well, I was studying whilst I was playing tennis over there, so in the NCAA in college. And then I had to do some more degrees here and go through the upper pathway of doing that. And that's when I made the decision to get my general registration in psychology and work with more clinical populations and do that hard yards first. So it was a lot longer process than if I just did a straight master's in sports psych. But I guess the why to that led to the how was I just find it really interesting how things work and how the brain works and how people work. And I kind of really noticed that the best achievers wasn't necessarily the people who had the best skills. I certainly didn't have that great a forehand serve. Serve definitely let me down. But I think I maximized my potential because I think I really tried to work out tactically how to play the game better. And I also I got very frustrated and very angry on court. And I could see also the detriment of what that had on my performance. So, yeah, I was just really interested of how to then help people too. And then that's what drives me is helping people and seeing their lives change and the success that they had. So, yeah, it was a really long pathway. I think all up, I was studying for 8 or 9 years. And then I did the time out west in outback communities and helping them with depression and suicidality. And I came back to sport and performance and got connected with Surfing Australia. And
how has been in that when you're dealing with people that are on like the brink?
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, that's super tough. And it challenges you to the core of your humanity because it's the toughest thing to help someone work through, but it also really challenges you to the depth of your psychological skills. And so not to simplify or objectify that situation to what it is, but I very much saw it as an opportunity to train and get better at my skills. Because it's working at abnormalities on the other end of the scale. Right, it's not the abnormalities that we're talking about before about being abnormally great, is that it's abnormal in the sense that there's a lot of stuff going on for them that's really, really challenging. And so there's some deep beliefs, some deep cognitions, there's a lot of chemicals and different things going on. So to help someone move through that and change that is from a skill sets point of view. And again, I don't want to minimalize it to about me and I'm doing a skill set thing, but that's how I first saw it, of going, if I can figure out how to help these people and make meaningful change, literally change their brain in the way that they view things, that's the greatest service I can do to society for sure. But holy hell, it was tough to learn those skills and sit in that environment and do that. And they taught me a lot. So I'm very appreciative of what I learned out there.
Yeah, seeing it firsthand.
Yeah.
And obviously being conscious of the impact of what you say can go either way. And knowing that as you say it. Because I think, like, I know you don't know what you could say to someone to really help them or really hinder them. And again, it could always come from good intention, but you don't know always how that's going to be received. And I guess you were put on the front line of that with people that are on the brink of whether they want to be here anymore or don't want to be here. And it's a pretty full-on crash course into understanding people.
And understanding the fundamentals of how the psyche operates, and really understanding of there is a reason why that maybe they don't want to be here, sort of thing, right? And really working through that and honing those skills. But I think you also touch on a greater point that sometimes, especially us males, we jump into solution. We see a problem, we want to fix it, right? And compared to, say, how the female mind works is far more like, it's just, you need to listen to me. I need to express what's happening. Don't just jump to the solution, because I need to tell you what's going on. And I think so often that we just try and give people unsolicited advice. Coming from a good place, again, as you say, we're trying to help. But spend time listening. Spend time being genuinely curious about what is happening for that person, rather than trying to promote your self-proclaimed advice onto them, which, again, is coming from a good place. You want to help them out, but it might not be what they need. They might simply need someone to genuinely hear them and sit with them. And if you understand fundamental behavioral change, it cannot come, or not cannot, it very rarely comes from an external source. I think the movie Inception's actually a pretty good analogy to that, which is kind of interesting, is that like in the movie, the seed of the thought is from inside the person, and they got to go deeper into the dream to get them to think that that's the thing coming back when they come out, and goes, yeah, I'm going to then, what does he do? Like sell the company to his son or whatever? Because I find that very interesting as a thought process. But really what it is that change has to come from within. Because you see that so often, is that you can even sometimes see that the person understands the benefit of what you're telling them, but they'll fundamentally resent it because you said it. Yeah. Maybe they're not open to it, right? So I think we need to be very cautious of unsolicited advice.
I think it's asking the right questions to get the person to figure it out themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what I guess good psychs do, is ask the right questions. Because most people know what they need to do, but it's not until they verbalize it, say it, that they actually will do it. And like you said, if you've got someone, you need to do this and you need to do that, wall.
Yeah.
Fuck you, no.
Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah.
You go, hey, like, how are you feeling? Why are you feeling that? Have you tried, like, obviously trigger them to be open to then solving their own puzzle kind of thing.
Yeah, and just a simple question of how you doing.
Yeah.
But not looking for like an arbitrary fine. No, how are you actually doing?
Dig into it.
And the questioner, the person asking the question, not asking the question because they either want a certain answer or they want to provide a solution to the answer that they hear, but genuinely asking the question to be on a curious journey with the other person. Because the person receiving the question might not actually know.
Yeah.
So let's explore it together.
Yeah.
But so often we just want to jump to the solution. It's like, well, firstly, they're probably going to resent you for doing that. Secondly, they might not know. They might not know why they're upset. Let's go on the journey together. Let's try and find it out. Guys just do this so much. I do this as well, but we do this so much to women. And they're just going, have you seen that? I think it's an ad or it's a video, it's a clip with there's this guy talking to a woman on a couch, and you can't, they're kind of an angle, so you can't quite see. And then she's going out, I'm in this discomfort. I'm really sore and I feel terrible right now, and I've just got this aching pain in my head. And he's looking at her and he's going, I think I know why. And she's like, no, you're not listening. You're not listening. Like, I've got to tell you about this pain in my head. And then the camera turns and she's got a nail in her head. And it's like it's a gimmicky thing. Yeah, but he's like, I'm pretty sure it's the nail. Yeah. There's a nail in your head. And she's like, you don't listen to me and whatever. And they just have this big blow up. And it's pretty funny because he goes, you're right. I just got to listen. And then lets her go that and goes, oh, let's go. And then they go to hug. And then he accidentally headbutts and nail goes. It's great. It's fantastic. You get it? Yeah, I get it. It's fantastic because what it's saying is that people just want they just want to be heard and they want to be listened. And some of us just jump straight to the solution.
Well, I heard this thing and it kind of hit me because especially with doing the podcast, there's a certain way you've got to talk to someone. And it was said, are you listening or are you just waiting to speak? And I know I'm guilty of sometimes just waiting to speak. And I'm obviously listening. It's not like I'm just ignoring the person, but I wasn't diving as deep into what they were saying. And I guess, like you said, it's like, are you not listening? And it's like, there's things that people give you to okay, that's something to look into, and look into that without having to, again, give advice or whatever you might need to give. Instead of that, you go, okay, let's just ask questions about where you're at to try and solve this without trying to put anything else on top of that. And I found that it's become more of a skill by doing this than anything else. And obviously it's just interacting with different people in different ways.
Definitely. And you see that a lot in social situations is someone saying a story and then the next person says, this happened to me, and they're waiting to go. And then, but how does that leave the person that just told the story? You haven't even participated in my story, acknowledged that as you just jumped straight into yours. So that person's not feeling very fulfilled and connected, right? But it's this desire to share.
It's a hierarchy. It's like, I did something cool. I did something cooler. I made this much money. I made this much money. Like I guess that's the thing.
Well, I think it actually comes from a desire to assimilate, which is
and that as well.
A biological thing. That you definitely want to feel a level of assimilation and connection, part of the group, belonging. You did that, I did this as well. So now we've got something in common. I think that's where a lot of it comes from. Very rarely is it one-upping. Like,
I know, but I feel like in some regards, probably not close friends, but in like a more of an open social setting, I'm sure people would use that as like, oh, you did this, well, I did this kind of mentality. But I guess in more close friends, you want to feel more connected than anything. And that's something that I've had to deal with. If you said something that relates directly to a story that I've been in or something that I've done, my old me would have been like, oh yeah, and compared to that, not compared to it, but join in and be like, yeah, but then again, the story shifted off you now and it's put on me. I'm like, but this is your show. I want to dive into that more, and it's becoming better at it's like biting your tongue, even though I'm not saying it for any other reason that I can relate to you, which is kind of like, okay, we can relate back and forth, but in doing that, you could lose your train of thought. You're on thinking about my story now. It's just, and
I think firstly, like if we want people to like us. Maybe that's where it's coming from. That likability, it needs to be acknowledged that firstly, if you want someone to like you, you got to be likable. So you like them to start off with. Secondly, what do people love doing? They love talking about themselves. So don't interrupt them. Let them talk about themselves.
Let them go, yeah.
Right? And then I think thirdly, there's really clear evidence, research that shows the more internally focused we are, the more correlated to despair and unhappiness. That's really interesting, right? The more we focus on ourselves and not other people and the external world, the more likely you are to be unhappy and full of despair. So get your house in order, get out there in the world and be curious about people and listen to people and enjoy the experience of people. That also means take responsibility, right? Take responsibility of what you're doing and your actions and everything. Take ultimate responsibility for sure. But for the most part, try and get out in the world and be curious to other people's experiences.
I like that. I was just say it's a good way to end it, but I got a few more questions, and we'll wrap it up. I was just gonna say, what does your life look like right now with working at Surfing Oz, and what's kind of like exciting stuff coming up in the future?
So Surfing Oz part-time, and then my private practice, the other part-time. Firstly with Surfing Oz, there's some exciting things coming up. We've got Portugal about to start on the world tour. We've got the Challenger series starting in Snapper in April, and then I'm putting out a curriculum, an online learning series on mental performance in competition that originally was just going to be for AIS categorized athletes, but we had a meeting yesterday and we're actually going to put it out to all board riders clubs, everyone that's essentially a state member in surfing. We want to keep it to Aussies, can't let other world have it. But essentially everyone that's a state member in surfing can access this online learning series on how to practice the theory and then the tools to get better mental performance in competition, which I'm excited about. So that's in the Surfing Oz world. In my private practice, very much focusing on corporate organizational psychology. So helping employers do pre-employment screening. I think this is a huge area that we don't get the right people at the start, causes a lot of problems downstream. So how do we make sure we get the right person that's the right fit for the job and the culture of the company? So I do a lot of pre-employment psychometric testing in that space, because the cost of getting a wrong hire is massive, is massive, both from a tangible monetary point of view, but the intangibles are also massive. So working a lot in that space. And then secondly, doing essentially in-house performance and cultural assessments of, do we have the right people in the right place internally? Because if we look at performance and motivation in the workplace, the foundations of that is, do you have strength and interest in this area? Because if you're not actually interested and have strength in this area, why are you doing this? And no wonder your engagement in that is going to be pretty low. So working with a few different companies and restructuring some people, putting them in different locations, putting them in different roles sometimes to match their strength and interest. So we do some personality testing in those areas. In some companies we've done the whole company and tested everyone and seen their strengths and interests, and then we've moved some people and they're going, this is great. And then some cultural assessments to see where we are at the culture in the company, and really it's all high performance. It's just in a culture, corporation, organizational setting.
Yeah, sick. I guess once you figure out people and how to fit them in the right places and make the whole machine work properly, and then dealing with athletes is probably the tip of the spear with that, but obviously you can relate that back to business and any kind of organization, really, can't you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's all performance, whether you're performing out in the ocean, on the track, on a court, or in a boardroom. It's dealing with things that are really important to you under high stakes environments and making good decisions. So it's all the same, just a different context. But I think secondly with the testing is that it's not just seeing how teams work well with each other on personality traits and whatnot. It's also providing the employee or the team member insights to ourselves. We're not aware of sometimes a lot of our strengths and interests and what we like and how we do things and maybe what we're not so good at. So if we then have an ability for everyone in the company to have greater insight, not only on themselves of what they're good at and what they might need to work on, but also their other team members. And so some of the software I use, you can compare team members and you can have a meeting with someone and be like, oh, Johnny actually really likes this and this and doesn't like that. So let's then tailor the way I go about it like this. And also understanding that the behaviors that you want, like we can upskill people fairly easily. There's a few things that mediate that for sure. But let's hire people and put people in positions based on their personality because they're going to enjoy it more, right? And then let's hire then in different positions in management because they're good at skills dealing with people. Because what happens most of the time is that the person gets the promotion and gets higher up because they're good at a technical skill, not because they're good at managing people. So like the example of the engineer, I think is classic. The personality traits that enable the engineer to be a fantastic engineer is highly detailed, highly practical, pragmatic, very, very detailed and good at that. They're so good at it that they then get promoted and now they're managing a team of 20 people. But being highly detailed and pragmatic is probably not going to be that great a personality traits to then deal with people. And then also you're really good at something that they're not that good at, and then you get annoyed that they're not good at it because you can do it really easily. So, looking at all these things is really interesting. So that's where most of my time is in that space at the moment.
Yeah, amazing. I got 2 more questions for you, and then we can wrap it up. But we kind of touched on one before, but first one, what are you scared of?
Damn, that's a good question. What am I scared of?
Can't say snakes. I already took that.
I don't know if I've ever been asked that, if I've even thought about that. What am I scared of? I guess there's definitely previously been a fear of not succeeding. I definitely had to work through a lot of perfectionism. I definitely, had a fear of not achieving things for sure.
Was there attached to that a fear of also achieving them but not being able to live up to that person that you thought you would become?
No, I always had that.
You
That was
always-
super healthy always.
That was good.
Yeah. And in that, I guess that I had such high expectations of myself that not achieving them and not being amazing and really good at things probably was detrimental in some ways for sure. So yeah, it's a good question, mate. Very good question.
And this is one we kind of touched on it before, but how do you want to be remembered?
I would like to be remembered by ultimately someone who genuinely does care. I like the idea of being kind-hearted to people and myself. I think my why of what I do in all the different areas is I love seeing people thriving and changing. That gets me out of bed every day. So if nothing else, I'd like people to remember that I genuinely did care and I genuinely did try.
No, perfect. That's a good way to top it off.
Just
being a light.
Yeah, cool, mate.
All right, appreciate it, Tom. It was good to chat to you and just like understand more of just the psychology of how kind of giving you the tools of, okay, I think like that, but why? And then understanding kind of looking at things from a point of, okay, this happens, but why does that happen? And then understanding that more. Because I think once, you understand that more, then it's like, okay, well, now that I understand it, I can be more useful with that thing. So.
And the quote I like, and I'll leave you with, is if you have a strong sense of why, you can do almost anyhow.
You just got to figure out your why. And only you know that. Only you know your why.
Yep.
I think we search for whys through parents, friends, family, social interactions, but like your values and your why, that's your thing, to look after them and understand it.
Take time, get detailed on it.
Sick. Appreciate you.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers.